So you're thinking of buying an e-bike. Here are a few considerations before you make that purchase. E-bikes are different from regular bikes. There's positives and negatives. The biggest positive is that you feel superhuman on an e-bike. It increases your power by 4 times on a heavier e-bike or 2 times on a lighter bike. They call them super light bikes, but they're not that light. They can carry heavy loads and they can climb hills with ease. The bad side of e-bikes is the motor introduces a resistance because of the magnets. So they actually, when they're turned off, they're quite hard to push without the motor running. They're heavier. They're almost double the weight. They need recharging depending on how heavy the bike is, how big that battery is. It may need charging every 2 trips or 5 or 7 trips. There's also quite a hefty cost to these Pioneer e-bikes at the moment, but maybe that cost will come down. But when you think about that cost as compared to having a car, they're a lot cheaper. They're cheaper vehicles. You can get a second-hand car, but there's a lot of upkeep and repair costs with a second-hand car. They are much, much cheaper to run. They've got a massive reduction in carbon footprint to a heavy fuel guzzling car. They're healthier and they're a lot easier than a regular bike. This is a bike that could change you to start riding because it's so easy that anybody can do it. Don't worry about the brand of these bikes. It's just that they have the pictures of all the different bikes I want to show you. This one is a foldable bike. The thing about this one is it has a low step through and you can lift your leg easy for older people or anyone that has any non-ability to lift their leg high over a top bar. This one has a battery in the seat tube, which is pretty amazing. So the battery can be taken out and that's good for security reasons. These bikes are expensive. I think this is over $2,000, this bike. So they are targets for people stealing them. There is a motor in the back of this one, the hub here. It's just got a regular derailleur, as you can see, to a regular pedal assembly there. This would be called a lighter bike because it's just got a smaller frame. And something to think about with e-bikes is you might not get the same bike as you currently ride as a push bike because the weight difference between a regular push bike and these kind of bikes, it's almost a doubling. It kind of changes everything. The componentry's heavier. They've got a completely different feel to a regular push bike. This is a trike. This does have a different configuration. This has a battery that's on the outside of the bike. It's not integrated in any of the stems. And it has, interestingly, a front hub motor. And so what people say is that this pulls you along, the motor in the front hub. And if it's in the rear hub, it feels like it's pushing you along. Mid-drive has a kind of natural pedal feel that you feel on bikes, and it's becoming quite popular because of their longevity. The beauty of this, having a battery inside the frame, is that they're easy to take off and you can charge them away from the bike. Okay, this brings me to the Australian regulations and e-bikes. In Australia, we have a 25 kilometre per hour speed limit on the motor. It cannot go faster than 25 kilometres, even though the bike can go faster. I'll explain more about that later. And we've got a limit of 250 watt for pedal decks, which is quite low. Yeah, both of those are low. 32 kilometres in New Zealand and the US, I believe. And I think in some countries, they have much bigger wattages for motors. This limit is low. I guess it keeps you healthy because you've got to work harder. 250 watt motor is very powerful. Here's a graph about, that's a E, and we'll just call this time. Speed over time. Classic graph. 25k an hour is here. That's the midline of speed. So we start off at a standing position on our e-bike and we start pedaling. And the e-bike motor is usually brushless. It has a cadence and torque sensors. So it knows what you're doing, and then it co-powers the bike. So you work together. They're very smooth. They're really fun to ride. So we start off and we accelerate, and then at 25 kilometers an hour, it just rolls off and the power stops. It actually stops. You're on your own, and from here on end, is you're under your own speed, your own power. But here's the funny thing. So compared to regular bikes, below 25k an hour is super easy on an e-bike, ridiculously easy. Then it's harder to ride above 25 kilometers an hour on an e-bike than it is with a regular bike, would you believe? Because the resistance of the magnets in the motor of an e-bike, because it cuts out here, but it still has the resistance of those magnets still turning. It's a kind of, yeah. Anyway, I think you understand the concept. So there you have it. E-bikes, a few different types of configurations. The main idea of e-bikes, if you're a new rider, you probably will just stay in this 25k an hour, no problem. It's kind of fast-ish, but if you're a regular rider who has a push bike now and thinking about getting an e-bike and you ride a bit, you'll probably easily go over 25 kilometers an hour, and you'll see, it gets hard. It's harder to ride an e-bike above 25 k's an hour than a regular bike, except down a hill, because they're so much heavier that the speed you get from momentum is far quicker than a regular bike. You just can't get to the speeds down hills that you can on an e-bike simply because of the weight. And it's another consideration that e-bikes putting in and out of cars can be really difficult because of that weight to put in the back of a car. There's not much to take off. It's a consideration that maybe for some people, a super light e-bike will be their only option. You really need to pick these bikes up to get a feel for the bike you're going to purchase and make sure you can carry it around. Thanks for listening.